Could you tell people that don't know just a bit about where the name Alixs comes from?
Alixs is my daughter's name, and there's another British designer named Matthew Williamson. So when I was starting my brand, I was like, if I call it my own name, people are gonna get confused with this other designer. The next personal name I could think of was Alixs. Yeah, I remember the first show because that collection, it wasn't developed for a show. Like there's a different development process when I'm repeating looks or concepts or silhouettes. There's like a process to creating a collection for show and continuity of color and fabrics. But that first Alixs show, I didn't know I was gonna show. And I had a friend named Alban that still works with us that he's French and from Paris. And he was like, I think we can gather a good crew and some friends of mine that are fashion production, and find a space and get everybody to band together to do this show. And it was really something that my group of friends all rallied together and helped create for me, which I'm super grateful for. And everyone showed up, you know, which was great. So, and then after you've done it, then the whole company and the whole team believes, oh, we can do it, you know? And then it became something that we had that momentum to keep showing. I look back fondly at those beginning years where everyone was contributing to Alixs to just create for the sake of creation, you know, and all the people that did work for the brand and created projects with me because they believed in the project and they were paid in the fulfillment of the creativity they were producing. I'm eternally grateful to all of you. It feels good to be actually back at that place today, you know, with the investment in Alixs and moving the brand from Milan to Paris. And now I'm spending time between London and Paris to spend more time with my 2 daughters that live here. There's a restructuring and a kind of, I don't know the right word for it is, it's like there's a calmness right now and a rebuild that again, it feels like a new beginning, but it's very refreshing and exciting. And it reminds me of that beginning time where I'm looking around and seeing like, who's with me? Who's ready to go?
How was it moving to Paris for Givenchy, where you became creative director in 2020? That was, of course, the year the pandemic hit.
I moved during a lockdown, and for a long time, I was working in the studio with masks, with tiny teams, and you know, we weren't able to show. It was a really surreal experience. I had such a great experience at Givenchy, and the teams and the group are incredible. And I only have positive things to say about everyone there. Also just discovering and learning about a brand as historic as Givenchy from the inside out, you know? Spending time with Hubert's family, they told me so many amazing things, time with the archive, the resources that are available to one at a house to create beautiful clothing, the teams that are so talented that help realize those ideas.
How are you approaching innovation in that context? The TK 360 shoe?
Oh yeah, that was a patented shoe development that we did where we created a mold that would emboss the sole to a 360 knit upper. So you have the knit shoe with a PU yarn that when you emboss the bottom, it melts the yarn and creates a PU sole. I always start with material first. It's always like lots of fabric swatches for whatever I'm working on. And then, you know, those get applied to drapes or vintage pieces or Photoshops or toiles, and just having all those materials on the floor, it's really inspiring. So there was this little piece of material that was for a football boot, and it was for, you know, like control for a soccer cleat, that it had these like melted bumps on the upper. and they were really raised. And I was like, oh, what if this was just the soul? Why couldn't we just melt it the other direction and it would be all one material? And it took a lot of development and combining different factories' know-hows to create a new supply chain for it. But I thought it was really, really great. And it was cool to do something like that at Givenchy because maybe at a sportswear brand, I wouldn't have been able to do that because it doesn't have the wear test or it doesn't have an application for sport. But in fashion, it doesn't have to have that use. So it's much more free to use some of these materials and explore form and shape in a different way. You know, there's another shoe coming out with Nike soon that's all around treadmill running. So when I was running in COVID, I was running on the treadmill all the time. And some of the shoes I was running in had a lot of bounce in it because they were designed for running outside. And then I realized, to my knowledge, there hasn't been a running shoe that was designed just for indoor running, just for treadmill. So I proposed that to Nike, and we started working on an innovation around treadmill running. So that shoe is coming from process of me being like, I need this. I want this thing to exist. This is innovation. Let's explore this form-following function.
How do you balance kind of something being both a creative project and a personal outlet with being a business?
There's definitely been years that have been really difficult for me to find that pure creative outlet that I felt like I once had through fashion. One thing I did was I started just working in other creative mediums. Like I started making music with my friends, photography, also stuff that I didn't really need to collaborate with other people. Sometimes I envy a painter that can just sit down at a canvas and do a painting. Started gardening, I got really into flowers and cooking, all great creative outlets. But like with fashion, it's such a collaboration with so many people and so many layers. Sometimes if one piece of the Jenga puzzle falls out, it just becomes, it's really difficult. You know, you're on a tightrope. And I think everyone experiences that. And I also think it's a reason why in our industry, it's not so exciting for the most part, is because there's business people thinking that they know better than the designers. And the designers aren't given a platform or an ability to create and show their work in an open space, or even that product have a chance to even go into the stores for people to buy.
You mentioned that you're making music yourself and you've got a little studio set up in your apartment. What kind of music are you making?
I don't know how to describe it. It's like cinematic. I don't know, experimental. But, you know, my friend Thomas, he goes by Ysi, YSI, which means number 9 in Finnish. He's really the architect of the sound. I'm in there working with him and giving ideas, and I'm learning more as I'm working with him. We'll see if I'll ever put it out. Right now, it's just therapy for me.
And I wanted to ask you how aware and self-aware you are of how you shape or present yourself publicly as a public figure.
I really just work and then spend time with my family. I have a very small group of friends that I spend time with. I'm not really out in public that often, except when I'm traveling. I don't have Instagram, but I don't spend time on social media or anything like that. I have an assistant that does posts for me or checks the DM if a brand or somebody's writing me. I don't think people really know who I am in a real way. You know, very, very few people do. I have felt in the past with certain articles and things people have said that they really had the wrong idea about me, and that idea was transmitted at a very large scale. And so I feel now like if I ever would want something to be more on point, it's kind of on me to be a little bit more open and show people who I am and my ideas and thoughts about things outside of fashion. It's just hard with these contracts because with these big companies, the companies that I work for, you sign these contracts that if you say one thing that goes wrong on social media, you can be liable and sued. And it's like a silencing contract, you know? And I've had that for a decade.
How do you kind of create a space for yourself to kind of deal with that? I mean, we spoke a bit off camera about the idea of rituals and kind of things that you do, kind of, and how your lifestyle has changed.
The meditation changed my life. It was maybe when I was 30, there was so much pressure and work and taking care of the kids. It was just suggested to try meditating to you know, help with the stress and pressure and anxiety I was experiencing at that time. I just felt like I didn't have enough energy to get through the day. And then, you know, I started being consistent about it, doing it twice a day, and month after month, I started to see myself change and the world around me change. And then maybe a year after that, I decided to stop drinking. And then that was like a really big shift in my life as well. And I think meditation in a way also, it cleared space over time, and it's still doing that every day, that it's bringing more people and experiences into alignment for my life, and also has had me be okay with letting go of certain people and experiences. I haven't been this happy in years, which is great. To have space just to create, do things, spend time with the people that I want to spend time with, time to go visit suppliers again and develop with them.
Can we talk a bit about how collaboration has been kind of an outlet for mentorship for you as well?
There are a younger generation of creatives and musicians that I'm inspired by, that work with me on projects or collaborate and create imagery or music for Alixs and other projects that I'm working on, and that's exciting. That dialogue with others that you're inspired by, it pushes things, you know. And I love that Alyx can be that. It can be an outlet and a support to create work for other people too. Collaborations are incredible to enter into your process in new ways. One gets in a loop sometimes of creating in a system, and it's nice to try to break that loop and enter into the creative process in a different way to yield another result.
I think most people now would describe you as a fashion designer, but how do you feel about that label?
The work that I produce is through the lens of fashion, but what's so beautiful about fashion is that it's an all-encompassing medium, right? So you have music for the shows, architecture, if you're doing stores or pop-ups, there's collaborations with artists, so many different elements. It's really a total sensory work. When I started discovering fashion, it was also through going out. I would see how people were dressed at a nightclub, and also I would get dressed up to go out, you know, to dance or to DJ. And then when I first started going to shows and they weren't live streamed or put on the internet, I would hear music that I had never heard before. And even, you know, so many people I respected, I would love the soundtracks of those shows. Like I loved all the Hetty soundtracks and different friends in New York that would do unique music for the shows. I remember when we sent Bad Romance to McQueen for Plato's Atlantis. That was a huge moment. And the songs also changed the feeling of the show so much. And I loved fashion's connection to music in that way. So when I started showing, it became really important to curate and sometimes commission or co-create the soundtracks. It puts this electric feeling in the air. Creativity is tapping into the same source, in my opinion, whether you're making a song or creating a painting or having an idea for a dress or a jacket or shoes, whatever it is, creativity is being in this state where you're connecting to like a source energy. I don't know how to describe it any other way. So you can label me as a fashion designer, but I can apply that creativity to whatever I'm working on.
I want to ask you why you decided to start a fashion brand.
I wanted to be known for the ideas that were mine rather than the ideas that I was creating for other people that had a lot of visibility. So it felt important to do work that was really authentic to me, that had my own voice. And so I wanted to start a project that was very personal and allowed space for me to include all of the interests in my life. Before I had the money to start my own brand, I would do product development and production for other brands. So when I was living in New York, I would do freelance for women's wear brands, like running the designs of the designer with a sample room or factory. So I got to learn about women's wear through creating others' designs. And then I was always excited about women's wear, whether that was fashion photography or looking at shows, going into stores and looking at women's clothes. And the women around me too. I've always been really inspiring friends and family, how they dress, what they're interested in, and just that dialogue. And I always wanted to do both. So I felt might as well start with the most difficult mountain to climb first, which would be like being a respected women's wear designer. I felt the men's path would be a little bit more palatable for everyone because I'm a man. I could talk about the clothes being authentic to how I want to dress and what I want to wear. Whereas with the women's wear, it was much more about, dialogue with the women around me and what they're interested in and a reaction to women I'm inspired by.
What was the intention behind that first kind of women's wear Alyx collection?
I didn't have any intention. The fashion's just been something that I felt like I had to do to be happy since I was a teenager. It's the only job I've ever had, was making clothes in various forms. So even today, if you ask me what the goal is for Alyx, there's no goal. It's just to continue creating and creation through the lens of a project that's very personal to me. And the intention was more just to have an outlet for ideas for myself and friends and other creatives that would like to collaborate on projects, for it to be a collective proposition. And be a reflection of now. When I started my brand, I already had been working with Nick for around 5 years on really large projects. And he had become a close friend, and I felt like he also really knew me and knew the kind of work that I wanted to create. So at that time, we didn't have enough money to do shows, and him and I were talking, and we spoke about, these catalogs that he used to create for Yoji or Jill Sander back in the day, and how beautiful they were. And it was a way to have mood from a brand. And I loved print. I loved printing. So we decided to work on this project with a great art director named Paul Hetherington that helped produce all the printing for the catalogs. And we developed special paper, special layout, special printing techniques, and even photographed and filmed the videos and imagery for the catalogs with how the images would be printed in mind, which is a really cool process.
A lot of people love to pinhole you, especially during that time, as a streetwear designer. That's kind of the term they liked to give you. How would you kind of describe the clothes at that time?
Sometimes it's labeled when one has a connection to street culture or rap music. And before I started Alixs, I was also doing a lot of work for Stussy, and I had done work with Supreme with the Gaga shoot. So there was connections to streetwear, and also I love rap music and did a lot of work with rappers and different artists. So it was maybe easy to categorize my work in that way, but it's also something I'm really proud of. I'm proud of streetwear. That's a huge part of my upbringing and interests. I still wear Supreme. You know, it's a brand I love. I love Stussy. It makes sense. It's a big part of my lineage.
How did menswear come into the mix in relation to kind of the Alyx woman at this period?
Well, men started just wearing the women's clothes. That was like an interesting thing. Before we did menswear, guys just started buying the women's clothes. And I was like, okay, I have to start making fits big enough and scaled properly for guys to wear, or people are gonna think the clothes the men are wearing are my menswear. There were so many guys that were just wearing the women's clothes, which was cool too, but it was confusing to stores and stuff. Sometimes they were like, well, can we buy this for men's? And I was like, well, it's just a women's wear brand.
Maybe we could talk a bit about the roller coaster buckle, which is your logo in a way.
The buckle was something I found when I was at Six Flags Magic Mountain with my kids. And it was just on one of the rides. And I was like, this thing's very cool. And I looked at where it was created and contacted the company. And the company was in Austria. And it was a few-hour drive from where I was living in Italy. So I went and visited them, and they were open to work together. And I loved that idea of repurposing something that wasn't used for fashion and applying it to fashion. The steel was different than what kind of metal would normally be used in fashion hardware. And there was a feeling and sound when it opened and closed that I had an emotional connection to. We've done lots of different variations of it, and I've created a similar buckle for Dior, and there's many brands out there that do things that are inspired by that original buckle. But Alixs is so much more than a buckle. It's a blessing and a curse, because sometimes one gets labeled like, this is the buckle brand, but if you really get into the brand, there's a lot of things to dive into.
Whose opinion does matter to you about your work?
Just my own. My work and personal life was being scrutinized by people that didn't take a second to actually know me as a person or understand the work. A close friend of mine, he gave me some good advice, and he's an artist. He was like, if you don't read the good reviews and you don't care about the good words that everyone says, then it also doesn't give as much weight to the bad reviews. And so I thought it was so great, and I decided to just remain neutral around all compliments and negativity, because it gets so convoluted. At the end of the day, you only know your history. I'd rather be known for stuff being beautifully made with thought and care and subtleties that you can tell it's touched by hand and last, and you feel intention and love put into the garments, and have it look like nothing else that exists. You can't take away the time and energy that needs to be put into things to make it well, to make it good. you can't like call that in or delegate that. It comes with the time spent doing the thing.